Hello, and thank you to the organization for Associate Degree Nursing for this wonderful opportunity, and to each one of you for making it real. It's truly an honor to be among educators, leaders, and colleagues who share one common passion: to elevate nursing education, embrace change, and strengthen our community. My name is Graciela Reyes Salinas, and today I want to take you on a journey of discovery, hope, and transformation. So let's begin. Together, we will identify key academic and linguistic barriers faced by Mexican-trained English as a second language or ESL nurses who are transitioning to the U.S. nursing workforce. We will describe components of a culturally responsive education model that promotes licensure success and professional integration for minority, internationally educated nurses. We will also develop strategies to support ESL nursing students within ADM programs, enhancing retention, NCLEX readiness, and workforce inclusion. Why did I decide to work with this population? Well, it could be obvious that it's because I'm Mexican. But my journey started in 1983 when I decided to come to the United States because, even if you don't believe it, there was a nursing shortage back then. So let me take you back in time. The year is in the 80s. We're in the 80s in Chicago. There is no internet. There are no computers. And however, there is a computer program to practice NCLEX style question that is called Nurse Star. This was available at St. Xavier College in Chicago, and we were allowed to use it. Yoo-hoo! A group of community leaders joined to fight the nursing shortage and at the same time provide culturally relevant care to the growing Hispanic population. Those leaders were Carmen Velasquez from Alivio Clinic, Fran La Monica and Sister Sheila from Mercy Hospital and Medical Center, Mary Lee Ball from St. Xavier College. All of them gather around a group of 20 Hispanic nurses to prepare us to reach our dream of becoming RNs. Obviously, among those 20, it was me. These internationally educated nurses that I was studying and preparing along with were brilliant professionals with strong clinical backgrounds, but we all faced enormous challenges. The NCLEX, I don't know if any of you have taken the NCLEX in the 80s, but the NCLEX as we know it didn't happen till the 90s. So in 1987 is when I took the test. Back in the 80s, the test was given only twice a year. So if you couldn't make it on one semester, you'll have to wait another semester. It took me 4 long years to gather all requirements and sit for the test in June 1987. The NCLEX was completed using a Scantron form like the one you see on the left of your screen, and we sometimes use those Scantrons still at the university. At least I used it at the school that I used to teach. The NCLEX lasted 2 days, 2 full days. And the results will take about 8 to 12 weeks to be delivered via snail mail. As we were preparing for the test, I saw the determination of my colleagues. I saw their struggle. And I realized that knowledge wasn't the issue. The issue was language and context. I had graduated recently from my nursing program, and as I was learning and studying to prepare for the NCLEX, I could remember that much of what I was seeing in those books, I learned in school. But it seems like it was becoming real now. It was at that moment that the seed for what later grew into our NCLEX transition program was planted. So let me give you now a background and significance, a comparison of the US population versus the Hispanic population, and the active RN licenses versus Hispanics with RN licenses, so you can have an idea of where we're standing on this. The United States today is home to the largest Hispanic population in the world outside of Latin America. Spanish is the second most spoken language, and yet bilingual speaking English nurses remain deeply underrepresented in the workforce. The US Hispanic population, like I said, is the largest minority with 68 million as of June 2024. Many Spanish speakers in that population. This represents almost 20% of the USA population. Hispanics are the largest ethnic minority in the US and have grown significantly in recent decades. The Census Bureau estimates the Hispanic population annually, but detailed language data is collected through surveys like the American Community Survey, or ACS, which are not updated as frequently. Therefore, while 2024 data exists for the total Hispanic population, the most recent detailed information on Spanish speakers is from the 2017 through 2021 ACS survey, which shows approximately 41.7 million Spanish speakers at home. Still a large number. Now let's go to the number of active RN licenses by state. The National Council of State Board of Nursing publishes this interactive map. The numbers are updated regularly. So every time you go in there, you click on it, you will see different numbers, slightly different depending on how often you visit this site. In October, we had a little over 5 million registered nurses and almost 6 million RN licenses. The states in light blue have more than 75,000 RNs. The census map from the previous slide showed the Hispanic population concentrate on the East Coast, Florida, Illinois, and in the Southwest, Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, California, and Washington state. There are more than 75,000 on those states, except for New Mexico, but only of those nurses are Spanish-speaking nurses. This is another graphic that comes from the Health Resources and Service Administration, or HRSA data warehouse, which publishes the Nursing Workforce Dashboard. This is an interactive site to explore the status of nursing. The most current data available right now is from 2022, so 3 years ago. According to this site, there are 4.3 million licensed RNs. Of those, 371,141 are Hispanic. That represent about 9%. Earlier, we saw that the population was 20%. However, the Hispanic nurses are about 9%. The same site shows that 7% of licensed nurses speak Spanish. That means 301,218 who speak Spanish. This number, compared to the 41.7 million who speak Spanish at home, according to the census about the same time, is extremely different. During my journey, I was the only Mexican RN on the floor. That means that I was the only bilingual nurse. This was before AT&T language services and much earlier than what we're seeing today, the artificial intelligence translators, which are much more efficient in translating and understanding my accent. They're getting pretty good. But we need a bridge. We need a culturally responsive and linguistically aligned pathway that could help these professionals not only pass the NCLEX, but thrive as nurses in the USA. And so the journey of transformation began. In 1996, the Commission on Graduate Supporting Nursing Schools, now True Merit, published the Trilateral Initiative for American Nursing, an assessment of North American nursing. This was a comparison between Canada, Mexico, and the USA. This publication helped me tremendously so that I could lay the foundation as I did a comparative analysis. I had a lot of knowledge about the education in Mexico, but I learned a lot about the education as a whole in the United States. As you can see here, there is a gap because this is where a mandatory test should be. There is no mandatory test. There are several options to graduate in Mexico, but we don't have one mandatory test. For example, my test was clinical practice in the morning and then an oral exam in the afternoon in front of 5 judges. Another option was to write a thesis after your BSM program. Another option was the Ceneval. It's a test that is similar to the NCLEX. However, this Ceneval is written at the knowledge and comprehension level in the Bloom's taxonomy. So as you can see, there are tests available, there are options, but they are not mandatory like it is in the United States or even in Canada. However, understanding all this allowed me to really lay the foundation and begin the program. Now, I do face a great challenge. These are statistics from the National Council of State Board of Nursing. The statistics started being published on the site and they're available for everyone. In 1983 is when they began. So as you can see, for decades, Mexican educated nurses have faced extraordinary barriers. This is true for Latin American nurses and for some other internationally educated nurses, but I concentrate on studying Mexican nurses. So the first line are the takers, and the second line are the passers. So as you can see, there is a huge gap. On average, we have about 30% passing rate, and that has sustained for about 40 years. So you can see here that in 2005, 99 people took the exam, but only about 23 passed. We had a better success in 94 and 95 when we had 25 passers, but the numbers were like 61 and 52 or something around that. So, but as you can see, throughout the years, it's been very low. I took the test in 87 and only 15 people took the test back then, and only 2 of us passed. So it's significant. This is the other part, the second part, another 20 years. And you can see from 2006, the previous one was up to 2005. So this is the second part, 2006, all the way to 2024. And in the year 2015, no one took the test. The whole year, nobody took the test for whatever reason. But it has been pretty stable on how many people are taking the test up until 2022, when it started escalating above 100. We have not seen more than 100 taking the test at that point. However, the gap continues. Less than 50, about 45 pass out of 130. And then in 23, it increased again to more than 250. In the 40 years, we have never seen this amount of nurses, Mexican nurses, taking the test. It was a huge jump up. 200 and about 260 took the test, but again, only 100 passed, so it was less than 50%. It was in the 40s. And finally, last year, more than 350 took the test. It was like 360 some. But again, less than 150 took the test. And even though we were in the close to the 40%, it wasn't a good passing rate. So that is the challenge that I face. What's the problem with this? I started looking into the whys. I started looking at myself. I started looking at the practice. I continue to have my license in Mexico, and I do have a relationship with nurses over there. So why? And I think the answer came in an article written by Dr. Alison Squires. She published the North American Free Trade Agreement, NAFTA, and Mexican nursing in 2011. Dr. Squires interviewed nursing leaders, and this quote you're seeing here is from a nursing school professor, and I think she explains it very well. I told you that Mexican nurses have a facility, an excellent ability to perform procedures. They can compete with any nurse in that area, from any place, but they cannot explain the principles that serve as the foundation of their actions. They know when there is a contraindication, if that happens to be the case, the reason why there is a danger for a reaction, but they cannot explain the why of it because they lack the theoretical background. Now, nurses here have great technical experience, but they lack the theory behind it and the scientific reasoning to justify their actions or describe their reasoning process. This article click and made me change the way that I approach how I was teaching, not only for these nurses, because at this point in 2011, I was teaching at a university in Dallas, Texas. And I started putting this into practice and looking at into making sure that my students understood the why. I think that the current trend in teaching is teaching clinical judgment. These include the use of case studies, simulation, debriefing, thinking aloud activities, and a greater emphasis on reflection and experiential learning. All this integrated throughout the curriculum. I incorporated all this in 2011 after reading this article. So it works. One of the things that I have been doing ever since is to hear them think aloud. I need to hear your reasoning because I want to see how you get to the why. I want to see how you're understanding this. We can do case studies, and I love the evolving case studies, especially if we take them in different tracks according to their thinking process. And that has worked for me, for my students in the United States, and also for my program of transitioning nurses from Mexico into the United States. Another thing that I did whenever they were having problems, I will have a conversation with them, but commonly I will use reflection and experiential learning to work with them, to get them from wherever they are to where they need to be in order to be successful, not just in the NCLEX, but in transitioning and practice nursing in the United States. This is just a slide where I want to give you a summary of what we have said. The total nurses in the United States, according to the map that we saw from the National Council of State Board of Nursing, is almost 6 million. 5 million if we only look at RNs with a license. And this is how many licenses there are. So a nurse can have more than one license. Mexican RNs who took the test was only in in the 42 years between 1983 and 2024, it was a total of 2,637. I hear my colleagues a lot talking about the brain drain, but I don't see a brain drain. 2,637 in 42 years. What I'm worried is that if nurses are coming here and not passing, it's not brain drain that we should be concerned about, but brain waste. When these nurses are not being used by the country of origin, nor here in the United States where we have a huge need for them. So of this, 730 passed the NCLEX on the first attempt. That gives us a percentage of less than 30%, around 30%. And we know that RNs who speak Spanish are only 7%. We're not really making an impact on that number. However, the Hispanics in USA, being 60 million, continue to grow. So this success rate, I say that it was in the 30s, but actually it's 24%. The highest percentage pass rate that we saw was in 2007 with 43.87% pass rate. That was the best time. I started programs. I actually started my nursing education program, a master's program in nursing education in 2024. I'm sorry, 2004, and I graduated in 2008. So it was then that I really started developing curriculums and learning and seeing how I could improve this rate. So we come to the transition to professional nursing practice in the United States program model. That's what I call the program. I don't call the program preparation for NCLEX or NCLEX passing or anything NCLEX. I don't want to prepare them for NCLEX. Yes, NCLEX is a byproduct, but I want to prepare them for professional integration into the nursing practice in the United States. So we're going to talk about the theoretical framework, and we use an eclectic theoretical framework. We use Leininger's transcultural nursing model. We blend it with NCLEX, the test plan client needs, and the National Council of State Board of Nursing clinical judgment model. Other than that, we use professional standards and competencies informing the program, and these include the ANA Nursing Scope and Standards of Practice, the ANA Code of Ethics, which was recently updated, the NLN Nurse Educator Core Competencies, Qs and Competencies, and the AACN Essentials. All this to put together the program. So even though PDUSA, the name of the organization, is not an accredited program, there is really no organization that accredits a program like ours. It doesn't matter. I still use the same level of rigor. I still develop the curriculum as robust as in any nursing program. The candidate must take an initial acceptance exam, like we do the TEAS, for example, in some of the universities. Also, they have to fulfill a profile and an interview that we do before we accept them. The candidate is measured against this profile before starting the program, and we use this NCLEX success rate as one of our benchmarks. This way, using benchmarks that are used by schools in the United States allow us to compare ourselves to what's going on, allow us to ensure job placement for our graduates, but more than anything, we have seen a great employer satisfaction with the graduates from this program. We choose to call it transition to professional nursing practice because this is what we do. We don't just prepare them for the NCLEX, like I said earlier, but we prepare them to successfully enter the practice of nursing in the USA. We start socializing them into their new environment to practice. Perhaps nursing schools do the same. We transition the student from being a layperson and we bring them into being a professional nurse. We can see that transition. I did teach at a first semester at the university, and I also did teach at a senior class. And I could see the difference. I could see that transition being real. So they don't look the same. As we transition them, we help them mold so they can be prepared for practice. But more than that, we model that practice and we help them achieve and acquire whatever is needed, modified. And I'm getting ahead of myself because in the next slide, I'm going to tell you how I do it in the modification and the achievement. So let me show you the sunrise model. I don't know if you're familiar with Leininger's transcultural nursing model. This graphic that you're seeing here is the sunrise model. And our program intentionally designed the curriculum using these three foundational frameworks, and Leininger's transcultural model being one of them. This model reminds us that care must honor culture, values, and language. This sunrise model provides a list of potential cultural and social structure dimensions that we face regularly, any one of us, anywhere we live. All these factors or dimensions deeply influence the care expressions, patterns, and practices. There are differences and similitudes in the practice of nursing. During interaction with the candidates in class, at a webinar, or during an individual meeting, we discuss these differences and or the similitudes, and we make a conscious decision to accept or preserve those similitudes. That's what I was talking about. If it is the same as the place where you're going to be practicing, then keep it. If there are slight difference, then change it and adapt or change it so that it can be aligned to the place where you're going to be practiced, and avoid or restructure the practices that are deeply different between where you are right now and where you're going to be practiced. I think this is true of any change we make in practice. If you're working at this hospital and you change to that, you learn their culture and you change how you did it over there so you can do it over here. If we change from being a bedside nurse to teaching at a university, or even being in education, in nursing education at a hospital, we change the way that we practice. So it's the same thing. They're going to be changing, and I need to prepare. It's the same thing for students. They used to be students, and now they have to prepare to be professionals. So this model helps me put everything in perspective and understand exactly how to change not the culture, the practice. Similar to what we do in preclinical conference. I'm not sure how you do it, but when I take my students to a clinical practice in the morning before we hit, I do a pre-conference. Most commonly we do post-conference, but I do a pre-conference. And there we set objectives, and we decide what is it that we're going to intentionally be looking for so that we can implement it. The soft skills are the easiest ones, and they usually have a set of soft skills that they need to practice, because then they don't need to look for the opportunity. Some of the technical skills, sometimes it's hard because we cannot find a client to do or to practice those skills. But we have a list of things, and these are always relational to whatever we saw that week in class. And because I work at an integrated program, then I was in class with them. I was part of teaching theory, and I was also in clinical with them. So that made it easier. In post-conference, we review if we were able to achieve the objectives that we set in the morning. And if yes, what worked and what worked best? 3 questions. What worked best? What was the challenge, and what will you change to make it better for next time? And they have to provide the answers orally. We talk about this, and that's where I ask about the why questions. That's where I did the deep reflection. That's when we started putting together the clinical judgment thinking that we need to do so they can get the critical thinking, clinical reasoning, and obviously clinical judgment. In either case, we go to clinical area intentionally and ready to implement whatever we learn in class. We do the same with the candidates. I don't take them to clinicals, but they have homework every day so they can put into practice in their clinical area. Another framework that we use is the NCLEX RN test plan. I'm sure you're familiar with this. It is structured around the client needs to ensure alignment with U.S. clinical practice. My curriculum is structured around the client needs to ensure alignment with the U.S. practice expectations. This test plan is used as a curriculum outline. We use books from Open Resources for Nursing. It's a website called WISTech Open. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it. I have the website right here. In this website, we get books, we get videos, virtual reality scenarios, virtual simulations. They're available, and the best is that it's free of charge. Anybody can use them. This was a project funded by the U.S. Department of Education, which provide textbooks that were developed by faculty. So it's aligned with NCLEX. Now, talking about the NCLEX test plan, as you know, it's going to change in April 2026. I have not seen published the new test plan. However, I attended a conference, and this is from a handout they gave us. This change that is going to happen is basically in management of care. All the percentages stay the same. There's not going to be a change in there. But in management of care, the change is about, they included an area on health equity, equal access to care, and unbiased treatment. The other change happened in safety in the name of it. Before, it used to be called safety and infection control. Now it's called safety and infection prevention and control. So they added the word prevention and. And there is a change also in the content here, and that is in restraints. Before, we just said restraints and safety devices. Now the topic is least restrictive restraints and safety devices. Those are the only two changes, significant changes that I saw, because the rest of it is grammar, is updating, of course, the year, because now it's based in the latest survey that was done. So very similar. There's not many changes coming up. Finally, the third framework is the National Council of State Board of Nursing clinical judgment model, which is right here in the middle. It trains our nurses to think critically, prioritize safety, and make sound decisions in real clinical scenarios. So this is the new model that we are using since 2023, April 2023, when the test plan was published. However, the clinical judgment model, I know that we have been talking about it for years. While the curriculum uses clinical judgment model, we follow the principle in teaching that says that we have to meet the student or the candidate where they are. What is it that they know? So in following this principle, I use the nursing process because that is where they are. So I always I meet them where they are using the nursing process, and we go over during one of the classes, we review, because there are differences. There are differences in the analysis. Remember diagnosis? When we have to do the diagnosis before the planning, well, that's still heavily taught in Mexico. So we have to talk about that. And I use this model also when I teach delegation and assignments, especially when they're going to assign to LVNs or unlicensed assisted personnel, because they are already familiar with this process, the nursing process. Then I start there. Then I introduce the clinical judgment model, and I also introduce the clinical judgment model from Tanner. What I have done here, as I'm teaching, I make sure that they see the similarities. And I color-coded here for you. But the assessment, recognizing cues, and noticing are very similar. So as you can see, they are color-coded. If you notice, interpreting in the Tanner model is part of the analyze cues, prioritize, hypothesis, and interpreting, but it's also part of the planning, generate solutions, interpreting. So that's why it's bicolor. So using this, it has helped a lot moving them from where they are to the clinical judgment model. We explain the harmony of these three models, then we allow them to use either one to observe and assess presenting solutions identify a prioritized client concern, and generate the best possible evidence-based solution to deliver safe client care. Actually, that is the National Council of State Board of Nursing definition of clinical judgment, and I use it to the letter on a regular basis. I allow them to use what they feel more comfortable, but we always come back to how that goes with the clinical judgment next-gen model. In other words, we empower them to seek the why. If the candidate do not ask questions about what they're doing, then I will ask them the why question. One thing that it was an eye-opening for the candidates, an eye-opener, is learning that the distractors could be based on common errors. Yep, as they are selecting or eliminating the distractors, some of them could be errors that are done here in the United States. I think that comfort them because they think that the test was done just to trick them, to make them fail. But understanding how the test works was paramount for them. When we practice questions, we use low fidelity simulation, also known as imagination, to discuss what could happen if the client you took care of or a clinical case was a real client, and what if you made that mistake? What will happen to that client? And we continue to ask the question, why? Most of the misconceptions about the topic are the current practices in Mexico, unfortunately. So helping them understand this has been tremendous. We built a curriculum that blends cultural sensitivity and evidence-based teaching, and the courses are offered online, asynchronous, synchronous, and in hybrid formats. This allows flexibility for professionals still working or living in Mexico. Individual coaching and mentoring addressing academic, cultural, and confidence needs is also provided. What I say is two strikes and you're out. What does it mean? I look at the trending and all the testing, and I'll talk about testing in a minute. But if a candidate is going down on the scores, they have the baseline score. Everything has to be above that. If there is a score below, I pay attention. If there is a second score below, we have a meeting and we need to talk about why, what's going on. I help them identify what's going on, their test taking skills, the way that they usually, their habits more than anything, and then to change them. So I divide these habits in internal things that are like associated with the way they're thinking, the way they're reasoning, and then external, the environment, the noise, being ready, things like that. And then once we identified, have to change for the next test, and usually it works beautifully. We have 3 levels, as you can see here. Level 1, the admission criteria that I explained before is when that is achieved. Other than that candidate profile we talk about, they have to have a BSN in Mexico. That is part of the program, and that is because in the United States, most commonly hospitals prefer BSN, and we know that. And then they have to achieve the required testing score required by Texas Board of Nursing, I'm in Texas, and by True Merit, who will give the visa certificate so they can get the visa, the TN visa, so they can work legally. So when they finish this, I give them a test, which I call it initial. And then in the middle of level 2, I give them a second test. And at the end, I give them a third test before they go on to nursing success or RN success. During the RN success, we do mostly testing and remediation. Testing and remediation is a virtual program, and at the end, we have a comprehensive predictor. We use ATI to do this. By then, they have to be eligible for the ATT. In level 2, they have to have completed level 1. They do the initial assessment exam. Like I said, they initiate or continue with the application. It has to be completed to be eligible for the ATT. And the average scores, about 65%. That's passing. Yeah, I think you may be thinking that's too low. Somehow, somewhere, that is the breakdown or the break point that I have seen. If I send a client, a candidate to test below 65, their chances for passing are not there. If I send them above 65, chances are they're going to be passing the NCLEX. This is not a correlation with some of the predictors. The predictor I use it, but I look more than the percentage, I look at the number score and then we remediate. And it has worked. For some reason, it has worked. Now, this is how the program works. It's a circular program. We go on we keep going on an ongoing basis. Why we do this? Because we get admissions regularly. Every week or every 2 weeks, we get admissions. So instead of asking them to wait the 16 weeks or one semester, we accept them into wherever we are. So each one of these is independent of each other. Even though they are related, they don't build into each other. So that's one area. So if they're going to start in safety and infection control, they will take the initial exam here. And then 4 areas later, they will do the midterm. And then after management of care, which is the final, they will do the final or summative exam. Like I said, we use ATI standardized testing for all these exams. And this allows us to track progress using predictive analysis. Identify who may need extra support before sitting for the NCLEX. But what truly makes the difference is the personal connection. One-on-one coaching, mentoring, and confidence building. We don't just teach content, we work beside them. This is not just education, it's transformation through relationship. Finally, let's talk about the results on our program. The last time I took this graphic, we had 101 of those. Active are 62, arrive or working are 32. This is when I took these statistics. However, right now we have 107. 45 Mexican trained nurses have passed the NCLEX, 34 have arrived, so 2 more other than this, and 11 are on their immigration process and onboarding with the hospital so they can start working. We have a 95% NCLEX pass on their first attempt and many with 85%. Every graduate that finished the program, passed the test, have 100% employment with a large U.S. healthcare system. What's even more remarkable is that these healthcare employees recognize the value of this initiative and they have funded the participation of each nurse. That's not just success, that's partnership in action. Each graduate represents a story of perseverance and pride. Several graduates are now mentoring others from the same program, creating a ripple effect of empowerment across borders. These are the challenges. So we have different challenges. It's a very different group. They graduated from different schools in different areas of Mexico. Some of them have more experience, but the more experience they have in Mexico, the higher risk for not completing the program or having low scores. So we work hard with them because this is a very different test. Vocabulary is an issue, and we need to make sure that they do not translate. I do not use Spanish. I do not let them translate. If they don't understand the word, it's better that they either look for a synonym or look for meaning. That will enrich their vocabulary, which is critical. Translating will not really give them a background because the context of that word may change and then it may mean something different. So I don't let them translate. We talk about the clinical reasoning and clinical judgment, which continues to be a problem. And these are the major problems that I face. Medication administration, when to call the healthcare provider, SATA questions, priority, therapeutic communication, assignment delegation and supervision, and basic care and comfort, amazingly. And because they know how to do it, but they don't know the theoretical foundation about it, which is what we were talking about. So this is where I work. I don't know if it's the same challenge for you, but the thing is identify it and then make sure that you address it somehow. In conclusion, our experience has taught us something powerful. Cultural and linguistic diversity is not a barrier, it's an asset. This program illustrates the unity of culturally responsive education, evidence-based assessment, and mentorship that can transform historically low NCLEX outcomes and bolster Texas nursing workforce. When we integrate these transcultural principles into education, we teach with empathy and we believe in the potential of our internationally educated nurses. To sustain this success, we need to expand partnership between associate degree programs and healthcare employers to support the transition pathways. We need to incorporate language acquisition strategies into nursing curricula, particularly for ESL students. We need to mentor holistically, addressing not only academics, but also identity, belonging, and professional confidence. Together, we can elevate nursing education, embrace change, and strengthen our global nursing community. This picture, I have some students from one school, another student, there were several more students from another school. This is in Texas, Dallas. And then two students, candidates, these are already nurses that were joining us from Mexico. As nurses, we're in the business of caring, and that must include caring for each other, for the students, and for our internationally educated nurses. Together, we're shaping the future of nursing, stronger, united, and full of hope. Thank you very much for joining me, and these are my references. If there are any questions, I'll be happy to entertain them in English or in Spanish.